I'm the director of the Society Policy Engineering Collective. And today it's my joy to introduce to you Professor Jeremy Pitt from Imperial College London. Jeremy is a professor of self-organizing systems and intelligent systems at Imperial College. And he's also the author of a wonderful set of books, this edited version, This Pervasive Day, The Potential and Perils of Pervasive Computing, that was part of a European Union project, a huge grant. The Computer After Me, Awareness and Self-Awareness in Autonomic Systems. And his latest book, which we're going to be discussing today, Self-Organizing Multi-Agent Systems, Algorithmic Foundations of Cyber-Anarcho-Socialism. This Pitt Colloquium is brought to you by Arizona State University, and it's our second series. And Jeremy Pitt has been an awardee of more than 30 European-based grant projects. He's written hundreds of papers. He's the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Technology and Society magazine, and just a wonderful human being. I met Jeremy through the Pirata project in 2007 when he first reached out, and I've been the recipient of hundreds of hours of research mentoring from him and knowledge. So today I welcome Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy.
That's really kind. Thank you very much, Kat. That's a very kind and generous introduction, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. But I'm going to have to enlist the help of Melissa again, because my taskbar for screen sharing has gone. So and the video gallery has gone. So I can't see myself. I mean, is there a problem?
Did it hide, like if you go around the edges of the screen, does it pop up at all?
When Kat took the screen sharing thing, it just all vanished.
All right, let me try and remove you as a spotlight.
Oh,
Does it
hang
help?
on. It appears
Found
to come back.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, it's decided to come back. I don't know what this power and control you have over the technology, Melissa, is quite extraordinary. Yes. Okay, so hopefully I should be able to do this and this and this, and you should now all be seeing my slides, at least the opening slide.
Yes, we got you.
I hope. Yeah, brilliant.
Beautiful.
Right, marvelous. So I'm sorry about that. There's always a small technological glitch at the start. So thanks very much again, Katina, for that introduction, and thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about this, the first book that I did actually write myself. And thank you everybody for giving up your mornings or evenings to share this with me. I regret that I won't be able to sign the copies afterwards as you form the orderly queue to meet the author at the end. But oh, well, there we go. I will have to supplement my meager pension some other way. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about this book, the title, but let me just add to what Katina has said by explaining a bit of background, how we got from PITT to PITT. So Pitt, this Pitt, you know, has spent N, where N is actually rather large now, years at one institution known as Imperial College of Science and Technology. And I spent X of those in a computer science department and N minus X in an engineering department. And throughout all of that, I spent much of it researching and teaching artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction. Because Imperial College is just a college of science, technology, and medicine. We took over a medical school and agriculture at one point when we took over an agriculture school for reasons I won't go into. That meant that for some of the more interesting problems and the synergies that you get from this, I've actually had to go outside computer science and electrical engineering and engage with researchers from other disciplines, which has been fascinating indeed. Yeah. And so I've actually worked with and published with people from all these different disciplines: linguistics, philosophy, psychology, law, political science, neuroscience, fashion design, and indeed medicine. Yeah. And through part of this program, I had the extraordinary good fortune to meet Katina, which has been a privilege and a pleasure in so many dimensions. It's untrue, but underpinning all this, there was essentially this one research program that was going on, and that is that from the artificial intelligence perspective, I was trying to solve engineering problems by designing artificial intelligent algorithms which were inspired by the way that groups of people would solve similar problems. And so they would have a problem, and this is where I would talk to somebody from linguistics or philosophy or psychology and law, and they would encounter a similar sort of problem, but a way that a society of people would solve it. And they would have a theory about how this might be done. And that theory would inspire us to write mathematical models of what was going on. And from those mathematical models, we could derive algorithms to see if we could solve our engineering problem. And that got interesting because, of course, then actually what you really want to do is to address societal problems by designing socio-technical systems which would consist of interacting human and computational intelligences. So the human intelligence have got this way of doing things, and our computational level intelligence, which would have these algorithms for doing it, and then see if we could make a socio-technical system that would solve a social problem. And the third thing, which again inspired by Kat and Kat's extraordinary leadership and editorialship of Technology and Society magazine, was to try to understand and evaluate the social impact of what happens when we embed these socio-technical systems back into the very society that they inspired the original algorithms. And of course, actually what's going on there is that there was this convergence on public interest technology. Now, I had no idea about that until I saw the adverts for the conference that Katina ran so wonderfully in 2020 about public interest technology. I first read it as PITT. I thought, oh, finally, they're having a conference which is all about me, my favorite subject, me, a conference that I might know something about. I was thinking, well, what happens if I write a paper on this and I get it rejected? But but I was wrong. It was public interest technology, and the really fascinating thing here is how Katina's vision, I mean, which is light years ahead of the rest of us. So that's a measure of distance, not time, isn't it? But never mind. Anyway, assume it's just converges with some of the themes in this research program. So the setting then for this is this mapping from PITT to Pitt, is of course the digital transformation to the digital society, that thing which is going on all around us as we speak. And we observe the increasing use of digital tools and technology in the digitalization and automation of social and organizational processes, structures, and relations. And that is creating for us a significant challenge. We have to engineer ever more complex cyber-physical and socio-technical systems. Now, the cyber-physical systems are those which are just going to be the ones that are interacting computational intelligences, and our socio-technical systems are the ones which have our interacting human and computational intelligences. And we want to solve wicked problems, and wicked problems are defined as those social problems that don't actually have an end state. You can't, amongst other criteria, but one of the key ones is this idea that you can't just say, that's it, it's done and dusted. We've run the program, it's finished, and program over, game over, whatever. These social problems don't have an end state, and they don't necessarily have a criteria for even knowing that you've reached some kind of endpoint. And you also want to support, not supposed to support, the full spectrum of human activities. So this is everything from the organizationals that we work in, through to our interaction with infrastructure, through to our access to medicine, to news, to entertainment, the way we even interact with our local environment. All of these things are being changed in this way, and this is why you will see E stuck in front of everything. So you'll see e-health, e-learning. If it's not E, it's a 4.0 tagged onto everything. So industry 4.0, health 4.0. Or if you really want to sell something, somebody sticks a smart in front of it. So smart meters, smartphone, smart cities. Yeah, I mean, this is ubiquitous, pervasive, and everything. But the other thing that Kat made me realize here is that we're trying to build these systems to sustain qualitative human values, but also to really optimize matters which should be of the public interest. And the problem is that we know that the technologies that we're developing are going to bring about change of some kind. And the old paradox, the only constant is that change is inevitable. And when we look at some of the most pressing problems that we face today, for example, climate change, for example, we need to have societal transformation of some kind to address these global challenges. But if we know that change is going to be brought about, and we know that change is what we need, actually, how do we make sure that the change that we get is the change that we actually wanted? But the other problem with this is that actually the rapidity of change. I mean, I can remember being a student, and okay, it was several ice ages ago, but even without that, we didn't actually have telephones, access to telephones. We had to find different ways to communicate and coordinate with each other. And the first computer that I was seriously programming was this massive, great machine that I actually had to write on some pieces of paper, and it produced these punch cards, a stack of paper that I had to give to somebody else who would make my program for me, and it would run on a machine somewhere else. And now I have more compute power in this tiny little box that I hold in the palm of my hand. But the fascinating thing about this is the rate of change is actually outstripping the rate at which the sociologists can understand these changes. It's like painting the ship. By the time you've finished painting the ship, the bit where you started has already sort of flaked off, and so you have to go back. We're being outstripped in our ability to appreciate the ways and the rate at which society is changing because of this technology. And perhaps the real downside of this is that these matters of public interest are creating or exacerbating issues in marginalization and social injustice. In fact, in two ways, I would argue. It's not just that there is a digital divide between those who are connected and those who are not, but amongst those who are connected and actually inside the digital society, there is another divide, I call it digital divided, between those that have power within this digital society and those that do not. Now, to give you an example of this, one that runs through a certain book that we're going to get onto is the idea of community energy systems. And so this is the idea that you're living in a house, and we're going to call it a smart house. So we're going to take the third of those three options. It's not an e-house, not a house 4.0. This is a smart house. And it has one of these smart meters attached to it. And I have a bunch of electrical appliances that I want to run: my washing machine, my dishwasher, my fridge freezer. I also have an electric vehicle. I want to charge that up occasionally so I can drive it somewhere. I know I'm very fortunate. I might have a bunch of PV cells attached to my roof. If I'm a bit quixotic, I might have a windmill out in my garden. But essentially what this means, and I might also got myself some combined heat power thing that I can store some of this energy. Yeah. So basically what I actually have here is a common pool resource thing. I've got a provision and appropriation thing, so that some of my devices are providing energy, some of them are consuming energy, and some of them are storing energy. And if necessary, I can take power from the storage thing as well. Now, if the amount of power that I generated from my provision system was exactly equal to the amount that I needed to run my appliances and I could get from my batteries, then everything would be equal. There really wouldn't be a problem. But there's an old adage from the power systems industry which says, you know, when you're dealing with renewables like this, you don't waste wind, you don't waste sun. Yeah. So it might be the middle of the night, the wind is blowing, but I'm tucked up in bed fast asleep. You know, I want to be generating. It might be the middle of the day, the solar power might be on, but you know, I'm down the beach. Yeah? And what this means is that, you know, there may be times when I'm generating too much and my battery is full, in which case, what do I do with the excess? And it may be that it's a really cloudy but still day. I've used up everything in my storage system. There's nothing being generated. I still got to appropriate something because I don't want my fridge to turn off. Yeah? Certainly don't want my freezer turning off. Yeah? So I haven't got enough. Where am I going to get it from? Yeah? So the idea, of course, is that you actually form a community. You team up with other smart houses to form a smart village, and you either buy or sell energy, or you lend or borrow energy amongst yourselves. But even then, with a smart village of this kind, you might see daily or even yearly fluctuations. So what do? Well, you get together with other villages and you form a smart town, and at some point you actually connect yourselves to your national grid to make up any shortfall or to sell any excess. But the key thing about this that you can see from what I've said is that actually what we've got here is a multi-layer cyber-physical socio-technical system. So actually, I mean, there's this beautiful example. When I was working in with multi-agent systems, the AI people had this idea of a smart fridge, and this smart fridge would know the stuff that you've got in your fridge and how out of date it was and what recipes that you could make out of it. But when you talk to people in the power systems industry, they go, oh, no, a smart fridge. A smart fridge is when you've got thousands of smart fridges all connected together, and they're communicating in such a way that they can coordinate their compressor cycles. And this is really, really important, because this means that you can actually do voltage control and frequency control, which apparently is really important for managing electrical grids. But it's brilliant because, as far as I'm concerned, I can just plug my fridge into this system, and so long as my vegetables are kept nice and crisp at 6 to 7 degrees centigrade, I don't care what my fridge is doing. You can turn the compressor cycle on and off. I mean, that gentle hum that you get in the background, that's all part of the daily living noise in my smart house. Carry on. Yeah. Now, us as humans, we're out of the loop. Yeah? However, we're getting more sophisticated these days, and especially more energy conscious. Yeah? So there's also program things that you can do. Smart appliances like this are coming with 2 settings these days, an A and a B setting. An A setting, you just turn it on, and a B setting, you can actually specify certain things, like about what time you want it to be finished by, and then you rely on the device itself to negotiate with others to say at what time would it be most advantageous to have this finished by, so that I use energy when it is most plentiful, and then possibly also when it is cheapest. Yeah. So this is what I call as humans on the loop. And now we've got interacting human computational intelligences, because I'm providing some parameters, but I'm leaving it to my device to negotiate the best arrangement within those parameters. The third level is it's like interactive. You can plot the trajectory of this system, so you can see, how much energy is being generated, how much is being used, and whether you're actually facing a situation where there's likely to be a shortfall, in which case, you might want to turn something off. And if enough people turn something off, then we could avoid the potential brownout that comes from not having any electricity. And so you could got two options here. You could either decide that you really don't want to be watching that television, and turn that off, or you can take a chance on that being during the World Cup soccer final, for example, and making your users rather irate. Or you could actually interact with them and get them to decide what needs to be turned off in such a way. And so now we actually have humans in the loop, because we really have a partnership between our computational and human intelligence. And finally, at the top level, there's this attentive loop. I mean, the humans are the loop, because actually you've got to make some decisions as a community. These wires don't magically install themselves. So you've got to make some investment decisions, and you don't necessarily want to flip that over to an algorithm. You want to make the investments that are best for you as a community. And the thing is, what you've seen from here, actually, all of these problems actually have social dilemmas embedded in them. In particular, for example, contributing to a common pool of resources, or deciding to free ride, or avoiding a collective risk in case of a brownout. And this exposes these kinds of systems to these kinds of problems. So how are we going to solve it? Well, here it is. Here's the solution. It's self-organizing multi-agent systems. We can look upon these situations as involving a set of autonomous and heterogeneous peers, whether they're human or computational intelligence. And they have to interact in such a way as to solve a collective action problem. And there's lots of different ways and areas in which this kind of problem has been studied from different fields. So, of course, these kinds of social dilemmas have been hugely studied in philosophy and economics under the umbrella of game theory, the science of strategic interaction, if you like. It's given that you model the people involved in these situations as players. There are a set of actions that are available to them, and a set of outcomes that will happen depending on what choices each player makes. And this is a scene, I should probably attribute it, but from the film The Seventh Seal, directed by Ingmar Bergman. I strongly recommend watching this film. It's an absolute masterpiece for a reason. And this is the classic scene, which has been mocked mercilessly, but it has our hero of the film playing chess with death. And our hero survives for as long as he can keep the game going. There's also social choice theory, because we have to make decisions sometimes about, collectively about what we're going to do. We might have to aggregate information. And this is a scene actually from a game that one of my students developed to model the kinds of social dilemmas that you would get in these smart villages. And you can see here perhaps the trajectories of certain the availability of resources and what is being used, and how could we actually get people to start turning stuff on. There's issues in dispute resolution, because of course sometimes some people are going to do one thing, some people are going to do others. It's also possible for things to go wrong. It's also possible that we're going to come up with some rules for this system, which are going to say, well, we're going to behave according to this way. And we might find that these rules can be broken in certain ways. So we have to find ways of resolving disputes. And I've actually used the UN Sustainable Development Goals here as an example, because of these 16 Sustainable Development Goals, you can't satisfy all of them at the same time. Compromises are needed. We also have theories of economics about self-governing institutions, and these are the ideas of Eleanor Ostrom, who observed that people were able to manage common pool resources by doing exactly what I just said, by actually not bowing to the inevitability that might be predicted by some kind of game theoretic results, but actually saying, well, what we do to avoid these things is we precisely do this. We come up with sets of rules in order to manage ourselves. But the irony is, of course, because these rules can be broken and the games themselves can be manipulated, we have a whole range of other problems that come as a result of this. The example I've got here, I mean, for those of you who watched the Big Bang Theory, there was this thing called the roommate agreement that the occupants and of the particular flat had. And this was actually my elder daughter's flat in her first year at university. She moved into this flat with a group of people that she did not know. When I went to pick her up at Christmas, there was this lovely piece of paper attached to the fridge with who did what jobs when and in what cycle. I thought, oh wow, they've really organized it. When I went to pick her up at Easter, this had been scrawled over the flat. I should blot this out, but Alexa had decided that this was a dictatorship, and the only way that she could possibly keep order in this place was telling the others what to do. I mean, this kind of, I mean, we'll come back to this. This can have good or bad things, because it depends. There's this issue of justice as well. It's one thing to say that something is fair, sorry, is sustainable, for example, in terms of being able to maintain a set of common pool resources. But it's another question is whether people's access to this common pool, and whether what they're able to appropriate from it and what is demanded of them to provide to it is in some sense fair. And this is the whole nature of distributive justice. And then when we have algorithms to do this kind of thing, are we ensuring that this is in some sense fair? There's issues of social construction. So I've taken this from sociology. These rules are just made up. We don't quite pluck them out of thin air, but we construct rules, and we actually, I mean, it's an act of human brilliance, ingenuity, that not only do we create these sets of rules, but we can also find ways of associating values and attributing good things to people who follow these sets of rules. Sometimes these conceptual resources are referred to as social capital, but but there are ideas like, I don't like the word social capital because it implies something that could be spent in a sense. But actually, I prefer the word social potential. There are things that we can do with these conceptual resources to help us solve collective action problems. There's another issue here in terms of knowledge management. I was studying social networking and what happens when you have different types of social network. I use this one as an example because it's a fairly trippy picture actually, but this is what the picture you get when all your net agents are connected to each other, which I think is right. But it turns out that knowledge management is a key property of maintaining some form of democracy, if you like. That at least this is what my friend and colleague at Stanford University, Josiah Ober, wrote about classical Athens was that they managed to sustain their democracy for so long, maintain their city-state in the way it was and outperform all the others on the peninsula at that time, was not because of this one person, one vote democracy thing. It's because they actually had particular methods of managing knowledge which allowed them to solve public action and collective action problems in ways which were better than anybody else could do it at the time. And actually, Josh Ober has another theory called basic democracy, which is all about the ideas of legitimate governance and meaningful consent of the government. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this self-organization works best when you've got some form of self-determination. And this is where those who are affected by the rules participate in the selection, modification, enforcement, and application of those rules. And that has to be done with some form of meaningful consent. Yeah? So you need the consent of the governed in order to be able to govern, and that's what makes governance legitimate. And in actual fact, you see, it doesn't really matter what political regime you have in a sense, so long as there is legitimacy in it. I mean, in one sense, that's what Plato had in mind when he was talking about in the Republic of the ideal city-state. But in a very charitable way, this is perhaps what Alexa had in mind when she had said, right, this is a dictatorship. The only way that I can get you guys to put out the rubbish, clean up the kitchen, do your washing up, is by telling you what to do. And everybody else goes, well, actually, that's fine, because everybody gets the same number of jobs, everybody does the same amount of work. We accept this. Yeah? And when you think about, we do accept this. I mean, we're all here at universities, and universities are hardly bastions of democracy and equality and equality. I mean, they're incredibly hierarchical institutions, but we accept this because it's what makes this kind of system run at least tolerably well in some respects. So I hope I've persuaded you that this is the point where, if it was only the case that somebody had written a book that brings all these ideas together, and yes, here it is. We should have planned this actually for next week, because next week I'll be able to take this forthcoming off, I am told, and it will be available in beautiful print and electronic form for a significantly large sum of money. Sadly, I mean, I had no idea that they were going to charge quite so much for it. But as I said, meager pension and a cat to support. I mean, I need to supplement it somehow. Anyway, I hope you also enjoy the Escher-inspired front cover, and this kind of sums it up to me, really, because I mean, one thing is that actually there are these paradoxes going on all the time, and second thing, you have to often plug all sorts of strange things together in odd ways, but the overall effect is quite appealing, and that's what I was really trying to get at here. With the cover, both the paradoxical and the sort of Rube Goldberg machine nature of these systems, the way we put things together, and the way they work. So what I'd like to do, since I've got only a few ways through the slide and used up at least half of my time, but to talk about actually where this now fits in with public interest technology. Because one of the things that this is doing now is giving us a kind of perspective on the design of these systems. So here we are, we're trying to engineer a self-organizing socio-technical system to solve a wicked problem. And it so much depends a bit on the perspective that you're looking at it from. So as with the front cover of the book, whether the stairs are going up and down actually makes sense depending on how you actually look at the system, and actually how many dimensions that you've gotten it. And depending on which way you look at it, these are the kinds of design priorities that you will start to manage or design for. So if you're looking at it from a knowledge management perspective, the thing that you're trying to address is how do you make information available for socially productive purposes? If you look at it from a collective action perspective, is how is it that we do achieve cooperation, coordination of autonomous entities at scale and without a centralized authority that's telling everybody what to do? If we're looking at it from the point of view of legitimate governance, how do we specify the structures, processes, checks and balances that will actually make this governance system stable, robust, resilient, and above all legitimate? We could look at it from a pro-social incentives point of view, how to visualize pro-social contributions, but not necessarily in just monetary terms. We might want to look at it from an aspirational point of view. So how do we achieve correctness in algorithmic decision-making and deliberation? And of course, this is really an issue of justice. But of course, when we talk about socio-technical systems, there's a whole range of qualitative human social values that we are actually concerned with, not just justice, but rights and so on. And also there's a question of identity. How do you make reliable transactions and establish consensual trust relationships in decentralized systems? And of course, this is something that Kat really knows huge amounts about this kind of issue. But I mean, in many ways, you can see all of these things as just different aspects of public interest, so that in designing a system, this goes beyond what's called value-sensitive design, where you actually try to make the values as the priority, sort of like super functional requirements, and design with them in mind. But what we have to do now is take all of these matters in hand and try to design for all of them, at the same time from different perspectives. So that's giving us two things. So one, a set of design principles, and I'm going to pick just two to have a quick look at here. The collective action one, the legitimate governance one, because the collective action one, this is what we might call sustainability design by design, and these all come from Ellen Ostrom. Okay, so her extraordinary work, which was for which she was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2009, and was originally published in 1990, was to observe that when faced with a common pool resource management problem, it turned out that communities were able to sustain these resources over very long periods of time, multiple generations. They didn't succumb to what has been called the inevitable tragedy of the commons that is sort of like predicted by game theory. Actually, the way that they did this was to actually make up some rules where people voluntarily agreed to abide by in order to maintain the system. And she even went one step further, which she said, if we know what the principles are that we have, the features are of a system that allows us to sustain a set of a common pool resource like this, if we are ever encountering a situation where we have this sort of problem, we shouldn't trust to luck to come up with the rules. We should actually design our institutions such that they have these properties right from the start. And one of the things that we said, well, if you're going to go to a cyber physical system where you've got a whole bunch of agents involved in this, rather than allowing them to try and evolve a set of rules, or appeal to these principles, why don't we turn the principles actually into code, so that the agents are running by these codes, yeah, and but self-modifying code, if you like, so the agents can actually modify them while this is running. And we actually showed that that sensor networks, for example, or ad hoc networks, where you've got to pool some common pool resources like battery power, bandwidth, storage, and so on. Yeah? You could actually sustain these when all of these principles were in place, and if they weren't, then some would be missing. Yeah? I don't want to get into all these principles, but I'll give you another example. So that's this one's discussed in chapter 6 of this book. Another one, chapter 10. If it is that democracy is your goal, and you know what the features of the democracy are, you can design for this as well. So this is something that I basically took from working with Josh Ober, where he had this thought experiment called Demopolis, and say, well, if you could just create this city state, yeah, and say to people, okay, your main objective here is the avoidance of tyranny. You've all said that the one thing you don't want is some form of tyranny. You don't want an oligarchy where some clique comes and takes over. You don't want an autocracy or a dictatorship where some individual takes over. And you don't want majoritarian tyranny either, where whatever the majority says, that's what we're going to do. Yeah? Always. And from this, we pulled out a set of principles that you don't want to have to reinvent your democracy. You want to prevent it from collapsing in the first place, because Francis Fukuyama was wrong about the end of history, as it turns out. Liberal democracy is not the end point, as we've seen. You have to be able to tolerate dissent. You have to be able to transfer power seamlessly. And of course, I don't need to tell you Americans about the importance of this. You shouldn't compromise on processes. You need to have diversity and expertise. You need accountability. You need education. And you need to be thinking about what you're doing, where this system is going. And so these are in fact, the principles of democracy design, and that we could actually put these into code and run simulations where we had systems that were using these principles. And then suppose now we've got design principles for all of these different issues of public interest. Yeah. How do we operationalize this? Now, I don't know whether our colleague Roba has spoken to you on this thing, but for operationalization, you really need to listen to Roba, because she's on the nail with this stuff. Yeah. But what are the features of public interest technology that could use these different sets of design principles? Well, one of the key ones here is, I'm not going to go into all of them for the sake of time. You have to read the book. Yeah. But one of it is this codification of deep social knowledge. The fact that there is all this knowledge in the social sciences, from economics and sociology and political science, yeah, about how to make these systems sustainable and fair and legitimate. Yeah? And we want to be able to encode that somehow in our systems. Yeah? But also, we want to be able to prevent some of the features of the network effect that's the product of the design of the internet. That's because it is so fragmented at the network layer, you end up with collectivization and effectively the platform economy at the application layer. Yeah? So if you wanted to create this, we need an ecosystem at that layer. And our recommendation for trying to do this kind of thing is something called Platform Ocean. Yeah? So Platform Ocean is this system that says that basically, actually, you really want to democratize, and democratize in the sense of make open for all, the ability to start up your own social media platform, for example. Okay? So the idea is that actually there's a software repository which has this platform that you can download, and you can then just configure and start running your own server, yeah, your own platform. Yeah? If you want an example, think about Minecraft. Yeah, anybody can download the Minecraft server and start hosting their own Minecraft environment. And it's actually just saying that, well, they really have in mind, we all have this router in our homes, which allows us to connect to the internet. Well, I really like the idea of us all having our own server running next door to our router, which is running our platform for us, which has got all our conversations going on. And so the thing is, people write down, download, start running their own server. They host it, however, on a desktop machine, on a little Raspberry Pi, in some cloud-based server hosting storage solution. That's not that I don't mind. It's completely transparent with respect to that. Yeah. And they customize it according to using these plugins that they can also find in a repository. Yeah. So, if I need a particular piece of application for a certain function that I want, I can get it from my plugin repository, plug it into my system, configure it, and I'm gone. Yeah. And so that's on the server side. On the client side, we just have a single universal app that allows you to download things which will talk to these platforms. But in particular, you can configure what the interface to this platform is going to be looking like. So, it could be anything from just a pure chat-based system, in which case I'll need one type of plugin for my interface, or it could be sort of, some massive 3D immersive world, in which case I'm going to need some other client interface and some other plugins to do this. Yeah. And then what happens, of course, is that, when you're interacting with one of these platforms, all the data that you transfer or that you release about your own identity stays on that one instance of that platform. Yeah. So here, this user is got identities on this platform institute 1 and platform institution 2, and is interacting through them through the same app with different databases, but essentially the interactions are self-contained within these conversations that are going on here. And so the data now is completely being self-contained within each platform. And it's up to the people, the users on that platform, to decide what it is that they want to do with that data. And of course, this is where defining your own rules comes in. And I'd like to give a sort of an example of this thing. So one that we sort of like designed was it's called Urban Refill, and I got a little small video to show you to see. So I need to stop sharing that and start sharing this. And so hopefully, is this right? You can see now a blank screen with a control. So
welcome to Urban Refill.
All good.
All is good? Right, okay.
Yep, go for
Our
it.
aim is to help communities reuse plastic bottles, form connections, and ultimately reduce plastic pollution. With Urban Refill, members and coordinators work in collaboration to refill plastic bottles of household goods such as shampoo, washing up liquid, and hand soap. As a member, you can make a profile, scan in your unique barcoded bottle, learn more about the products that you're buying, and connect with your community. Refilling a bottle is easy. Simply drop your empty bottle off at the coordinator's location, who stores the products in bulk. Within 7 days, the coordinator will return your refilled bottle back to you. The coordinator scans in empty bottles to generate a refill workflow. Through the member map, the coordinator can see where the bottles need to be dropped off and when, so that a logical route can be mapped. Through the information page, both members and coordinators can ask questions, help each other, and chat. And finally, both individual and community achievements are displayed, allowing members and coordinators to see the impacts of their reuse on effects such as CO2 emissions saved and animal lives protected. As individuals and as a community, you'll earn badge rewards when reaching certain milestones, so you'll always know what a great contribution you're making. So that's Urban Refill, app designed to help you reduce plastic pollution, protect our planet and connect with your community.
Yeah, so stop sharing. So let me go back to my slides. I hope that gave you an idea of the kinds of things that you might be able to do with, I hope the slide is back. Yeah. This idea of reducing plastic usage being a matter of public interest, and the idea that you have a small group of people that are recycling their bottles, yeah, but they have their own private platform to do this, and another group has their own platform to do this. And you can see that there was a map there. Well, that map should just be a plugin, for example, to be able to, when you need map type functionality, it's just a plugin and you can use it for free. And this is how we could start really building up and empowering communities from the bottom up by giving them the technology that they can use to build these things. So if I may, I'd just like to finish off now, Kat, another 5 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, 5 to 10 minutes? Yeah.
Yes.
Because the more astute amongst you might have noticed that the subtitle of this book was Principles of Cyber-Anarcho-Socialism. Now, I do know that I'm sort of getting all defensive. This is an American audience, and that socialism is considered a bit of a bad word. But it isn't. It really isn't. There's nothing to be scared of. Yeah. But I wanted to try and share with you, actually the principles of cyber-anarcho-socialism. It started off as a bit of a joke because of all these sort of these liberal ideas of being nice to the planet and human values, and so for some reason these are things which are not socialist or liberal. But then I started thinking actually rather more deeply about what the principles of cyber-anarcho-socialism would be, and there's like 5 points about the anarcho and 5 points about the socialism, which I'd like to just leave you with as a thought-provoking thing. And it's the idea actually that it's not that anarchy is like no rules. What we're really trying to get at is the fact that there's no rules that that can't actually justify themselves. I mean, the reason that we have this rule is because of this. It's not so that somebody can say, well, we've always done things this way. It's really about what going against what David Graeber, who's sorely the missed sociologist, was describing as the utopia of rules in one of his books. And again, it really picks up on this issue that I mentioned earlier, that no form of governance is legitimate without some form of meaningful consent. There's this idea that anarcho-socialism is also sort of like social anarchism. There is a paradox, whether we like it or not, is that our individuality and our solitude and our independence actually depends on collectiveness and solidarity with others in a community. And so, really want to try and emphasize the communitarian and cooperative aspects of anarchist theory and practice, and in particular the notions of gift economies. And this is something that I think we've completely lost track of. but many societies operated on the idea of gifts. And it wasn't the object itself that was necessarily so valuable, but it was the meaning that was attached to the object and what it symbolized and what it enabled that was so important. And the fabulous example of this was the gift economies that were studied by Malinowski, the founder of legal anthropology, when he looked at the some of the islands in the North Pacific, that it was the giving of the gifts that created bonds between islands, that when there was a crisis, that they would all help each other out. And we have exactly this. So we've kind of lost it. That money. There's a reason why it's said to be in circulation. We call it currency. It's because it has this, what in the military terms we called a force multiplier. It's not that I have a coin here with this. Is a £1 coin. This is real apparently sort of money. But it's the fact that I can spend it, and then somebody else can spend it, and somebody else can spend it. And this is what we lose when you get these big tech companies coming from outside and sucking the currency out of the city by charging something like 20% on every transaction that is enabled. Because you take the currency out of circulation, and then you don't get these transactions, which basically form a platform on which other values can be built. We also want to talk about subsidiarity, about the organization empowerment of local communities within a system of systems, which includes regional and national and international order. And this is specifically actually two of Ostrom's principles about the system of systems, but also the need for local communities to have minimal rights to self-organize, which are recognized and respected by external authorities. Another thing about, I talked about paradox. I mean, it turns out that we need to have this pretense that the rule of law is unbreakable and unshakable, but we also have to have it subject to constitutional amendment. So we're really trying to have our cake and eat it. These laws are unbreakable, but no, we can actually change them. They're fixed. We can change them. And that's because actually there is a tension that is required between having a set of laws and civil disobedience. The ability to actually be able to say that, well, our experience on the ground of the application of these rules is not right, and we need to change them. And the only way to get you to change them is to disobey them en masse. I've talked about this idea of legitimacy all through, about how you're really wanting to support what it actually means to be human, the constitutive human capacities. But you want to create opportunities for socially productive purposes and critically avoid tyranny in all its various forms. That includes in particular majoritarian tyranny. I'm thinking here about the Brexit vote, where people said, well, we had a vote and the majority won, and that's it, you lost, shut up, that's it, it's all over now. And this is majoritarian tyranny. It is a fallacy to suppose that values and preferences are an infallible and unquestionable and timeless product of votes like this. Always possible to change things. And then on the social side of things, I'm afraid about this. Socialism doesn't mean that there's no private property. It's only really that the private property is rejected if it's considered absolutely essential to the well-being or functioning of the collective, right? So one can think about both health, with all due respect to the American healthcare system. I think it started off as something that was designed to provide health, but had a bit of wealth transfer associated. But now it is just a wealth transfer system which has got a little bit of healthcare attached to it. Yeah, this is not the way to run, health service. Yeah. Frankly, honestly, I think social media has gone the same way. They started off as a way of providing a service to people with a bit of wealth transfer attached, but now it is all about the wealth transfer and a little bit of service attached to it. And I'm sorry, you see platforms like Doodle. I hate Doodle these days. Sorry, guys, Doodle. But I mean, brilliant idea. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, but it just now depresses the hell out of me to just go onto a Doodle poll, get adverts thrown at me, to get my data being monetized. Yeah, this is a social service. Yeah, come on, this should be. It was wonderful when it was free. Yeah, everybody used it. Yeah, and now it's just it is being monetized and we're being monetized, and there's no reason for that. It's the same with in the UK. We have this Just Giving, which is a way of making charitable donations through the internet. A brilliant idea, except that some people are creaming off 20% of every single transaction to enrich themselves, out of other people's charitable efforts. Yeah, no, come on, this should be a centralized service. You want to be a charity, okay, operate it through your local church, your local mosque. I don't care, but the community gets the money and the benefit, not a few individuals who are just as I say, extracting wealth from the system. We have definitely problems with the privatization and invention and the private owners of the means of social coordination. And as Kat will tell you, it's a fundamental problem with the ownership of data. Everywhere we go now, who owns what bit of data and is doing what with it for whose benefit? These are fundamental questions, and they're largely going unanswered. And your risk is when actually the big tech organizations and the government are colluding in the asymmetric abuse of the power relationship with us as citizens, as people, by we are the ones that are generating the data and they are the ones that are benefiting disproportionately from it. And you can see why in the UK, the big tech companies are desperate to get hold of the NHS databases. Brilliant, all this data, which they can train their AI algorithms on it, which could provide a great public service, but you can bet your bottom dollar, or you will be paying with that bottom dollar to access that service, because they are not going to give it away for free. Sorry, there was a bit of a rant. I apologize for the ranty nature of this. It's also the case that the function of the society and government has to be rooted in the underlying economic system, and that doesn't mean surveillance capitalism, frankly, of the type that I've just been talking about in the data ownership. It doesn't mean techno-feudalism, whereby you receive your payment in a cryptocurrency, and that cryptocurrency can be controlled in terms of what it is you can and cannot buy with it. We do want progressive reform and systemic improvement, because we want to avoid this kind of performative governance where people are only enacting policies just for the look of it and not for the fact that they actually have some actual vision of a better society that can come out, and they just want to avoid accountability for the irresponsibility of their decisions. We do want to have universal education in the values of civic participation and sharing the burden of self-governance. And this is one of the things that it's been talked about in America, about the decline of civic participation. I think it's crucial that one of the things that we could do with Platform Ocean is actually build citizens' assemblies, and not just citizens' assemblies, but students' assemblies. Put this kind of thing into a school. I mean, I just think it's absolutely unbelievable that the Brexit referendum made a decision which was skewed by people who had been given the power and vote, taking away rights from young people who didn't have the right to participate in the decision that was going to affect them, for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just fundamentally unfair, yeah, if you ask me. I go back to Josh and Ober. I mean, if you can get this book, it's the political science equivalent of a neutron star, because it's a rather thin little tome, but every page takes about 2 days to read, because it is so densely packed with knowledge, wisdom, and ideas and thoughts. It's extraordinary. But the essence of his program is that his basic democracy is literally about a form of self-governance which is delimited by this notion of civic dignity. Yeah, that it sort of like defines it as that you're socially accepted as a civic participant, and that kind of induces you to social behavior. And it's undermined if you're tricked into making a decision that you would not have made had you been appraised of all the facts. Yeah. And I think this is so important because I think that we as a species actually evolved the capacity to engage in politics because it offers an effective and efficient and mutually beneficial way to solve these collective action problems, wicked problems of the kind that I was talking about. And they will inevitably arise when you get a group of individuals which have different preferences, priorities, and they have to live together. And it gets worse when you do that at scale. And this program is the way out of this. And in particular, if we can put this program into technologies of the kind that Katina has been advancing with such brilliance and such passion for the last few years. So that's it. I'll leave that there. There's a bit of nominative determinism involved in all this, of course. That's a picture of Jeremiah, the prophet of doom, outside the ruins of Jerusalem. And what he's writing on that bit of parchment is, "I told you so," because he predicted the fall of Jerusalem and no one believed him. And that picture there is of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, the film. Yeah. I went to Japan for a conference one time, and I came back. And when I came back, this film had just opened up, and so I took my young children to go and see this film, this charming movie. And at the end of it, it said, "Oh, this film was made in Japan." As we came out, one of my daughters said to me, "Did you go to Japan to do the voiceover for Eeyore? Because apparently I sound exactly like Eeyore in this film." So, anyway, my point though is, I'd like to think I'm not all doom and gloom. Yeah, I'm not the cynical one. Yeah, I have a belief in human nature. I think we can do better than this. Whether our societies are made up of multi-agent systems, purely in silicon, whether they are societies of people, or whether in the digital society we're going to have both. But I think that we can take the ideas of people like Ostrom, people like Ober, particularly people like Kat, and we can do better than this.